of Uttar Pradesh came to us with a complaint of abdominal pain since 3 months, bladder stools since one
See,
and a half.
here you don't have to say came to us because this is not oncology unit he's coming to. You have to present as if he's come to you, no?
Yes, sir.
So you just say that 65-year-old gentleman, farmer by occupation, had came with the complaints of. Came to us का जरूरत नहीं है. Came to us, you are saying because he came to your unit.
Okay, sir. Okay.
So just came because that is not required in the exam.
Fine, sir. Okay.
Okay, abdominal pain since 3 months.
Bladder stools since 1.5 months, weight loss and decreased appetite. He was alright 3 months back when he noticed pain in right upper half of the abdomen, colicky in nature, intermittent, insidious in onset, non-radiating, no aggravating factors, decreased by taking oral analgesics. He takes once a day. He gets a history of passing bladder stools, hard in consistency, past 1.5 months. They're non-smelling, this foul smelling, and he passes them once in 3 days. He passes flatus regularly. He has lost 5 kg weight in past 3 weeks, evident by loosening of his pants. He has experienced loss of appetite, earlier taking approx 9 chapatis a day, now taking 4 to 5. He has been recently transfused with 2 units of blood at Tata Memorial Hospital. There's no history of...
The other thing is you have given this, no, how much weight he has lost. So that is, if you have given... if you're saying he's approximately lost some weight, he's noticed considerable loosening of his pants is one thing, but that is, you should say only if you're saying that he's had some approximate weight loss. Here you are saying that he has lost 5 kilos, then that is the exact amount of weight loss. So then you don't need to say that it is evident by loosening of his pants.
Okay, sir.
So he has experienced loss of appetite earlier. Yeah, so that's okay. So he has had, he's got a significant loss of appetite and significant weight loss.
Okay, sir. Okay.
So there, of course, they may ask you what is significant weight loss, you know.
Yes, sir.
So you should know those are simple things, but you should know the answers to that also.
Yes, sir.
When you say loss of weight, no, and then they may ask you, especially in onco, they will ask you all the methods by which you can, measure weight loss in terms of muscle loss, skin fold thickness, all those things you should know very well.
Okay, sir.
You should also know about the newer concepts of sarcopenic obesity and things like that.
Sir, which obesity, sir?
Sarcopenic. So you may have weight loss, muscle loss, but you may still look obese.
Okay, sir.
So many of these patients, actually, there are now quite a few studies, especially in pancreatic cancer, on sarcopenic obesity, where the prognosis is poorer because they have weight loss and more muscle loss, but not much fat loss.
Okay, sir.
Anyway, I'm just saying, read about it. So that answer should be very clear. Supposing they tell you, what is significant weight loss, don't get stuck there.
Fine, sir.
Okay.
So he's lost 5 kg weight in past 3 weeks and significant loss of appetite. There is no history of obstipation, mucus discharge, tenesmus, early satiety, nausea, vomiting, abdominal distension, hematomesis, no history of taking any medications, fever, cough, hemoptysis, hematuria, or backache. Past history is not significant of any surgery, comorbidity, or tuberculosis. The personal history consumes non-vegetarian diet, no addictions, bladder habits are normal, sleep pattern is normal, he is educated till 10th standard, married and has 3 children. Family history is insignificant for any familial cancer in the first or second degree relatives. So on the basis of history, sir, I have 4 differential diagnoses. First thing is could be a mass arising from the colon, second distal gastric mass, and third is gallbladder mass, fourth hepatic mass.
Okay. So on the what basis you are saying lower GI tract colon? See, one of the things the history is not very clear is you mentioned that the history is of a black colored stool.
Yes, sir.
So you are trying to say that he has got a GI bleed.
Yes, sir. Yes,
but
sir.
other features are not there, no? So that they may ask you, what is the, so you're saying essentially it is melena, but it was not foul smelling, it was hard. So how will you justify that he was having melena,
So,
You
just
understand what I'm asking, So it is, you may have to correlate that with some symptom you'll have to say which is fitting in with a GI bleed, you
okay.
understand?
Yes, sir. Easy fatigability, like that thing, sir.
Yeah, so you can say if he is easy fatigability, that's important. And but even then you'll have to correlate it with this particular black colored stool. There are no other features at all. See, melena is usually more than once. Here it is once in 3 days.
Yes, sir.
It is not hard. It is tarry, in fact, and it is foul smelling. So
Yes,
none
sir.
of the other features are there. What I'm just trying to tell you that if you want, you can mention 1 or 2 features, because
Okay, sir.
otherwise he will ask you that you are talking about lower GI bleed, but he is having no other. It could be just black colored stool due to iron tablets.
Yes, sir.
That causes constipation. That causes the black stool, and that causes nothing else.
Yes, sir.
So I'm just tell you that when your first differential is based on a colonic mass or a gastric mass is based on melena, based on
Melena.
lower GI bleed. So उसके ऊपर अटकना नहीं चाहिए. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so then you can carry on.
Sir, I'll move to this examination, sir.
Yes.
He was examined in broad daylight, exposed from nipple to mid thigh, with verbal consent and the presence of male attender. He is cooperative, conscious, and well oriented to time, place, and person. ECOG performance status 1, vitals stable, afebrile, well hydrated, average build, BMI 20.5 kg per meter square. Baylor is present. There is no icterus, generalized lymphadenopathy, pedal edema. Rest of the systems are normal. Hernial orifice is normal. No palpable supraclavicular lymph node. PR is normal. External genitalia normal. No renal angle fullness. Spine is normal. So on local examination, on the inspection, done in supine position, the abdomen is flat. The umbilicus is central, inverted, and in the midline. Ill-defined visible fullness is noted in the right umbilical, in the lumbar and the epigastric region. It does not move with respiration. There is no dilated veins, scars, sinuses, peristalsis, pulsations noted. All respective quadrants move equally with respiration. Palpation, the inspective findings were confirmed. It was done in this legs semiflex position. Abdomen is soft, non-tender, non-distended, with an intra-abdominal, uniformly hard, irregular, 10 by 8 centimeter mass in the right lumbar, umbilical, and epigastric region.
Okay. Sorry, carry on.
Yes, sir. So laterally up to the anti-axial line, medially up to the midline, and superiorly is 2 fingers beneath the costal margin, and inferiorly 3 centimeters above the umbilicus. It's mobile in all the directions, but with restriction. There is no malleability. This bimanual palpation is not possible and is not there. And no, it's non-pulsatile and it does not move with respiration. There is no hepatosplenomegaly. On percussion, the liver span is 10 centimeter in the mid-clavicle line. Dull note is present over the lump, which is separate from the liver dullness. There is no ascites, no auscultation. Normal bowel sounds are heard. So, on the basis of history, sir, an examination, there is a 65-year-old gentleman with abdominal pain, melena, significant weight loss, and anorexia, with a mass palpable in the right upper quadrant of the abdomen. Probably arising from the ascending colon, the hepatic flexure of the colon.
No. Don't say that just now. You just say that it's a lump. No, then that ascending colon, that you have to give in your differential.
Okay, sir. So it's a mass
summary. Okay, so that's your summary.
Yes, sir.
And okay, so what do you think is the differential diagnosis?
Sir, after this examination, sir, I can think of this one disease of this out of the four. This one is the most probable diagnosis.
Um, but why not stomach?
So in this stomach, sir, this upper GI symptoms are not just like early satiety, then abdominal distension, postprandial nausea, vomiting, and so secondly, this was not moving with respiration. So the stomach mass will move with respiration.
Okay. Yeah, so you basically need to justify that, but you can give a second differential as a stomach lesion. Also, you can say it is a little lower than what you would see in the stomach. You know, it is extending from right upper quadrant. When you described it 10 centimeters lower down, it is going towards the umbilicus. That stomach may not go, so much lower down.
Yes, sir.
So, how will you proceed now?
Sir, for this, I would like to go for a sonography of the abdomen and pelvis. It's an extension of my clinical diagnosis and to find the organ of origin. So
Yeah, but you also need to do before that hemogram and all that. So you described anemia,
yes, sir. The routine blood investigations.
routine blood investigations. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So, what is the routine blood investigations and ultrasound? Okay, so what are those reports showing?
The ultrasound was showing there's a circumferential thickening involving the hepatic flexure of the colon, and this fat planes with the adjacent structures could not be commented. There was no significant lymphadenopathy. 3 mm GB calculi was seen. Liver was normal, and there was no ascites. And then in the CBC, all things were normal except for HB, which was 8.5, and this 8.5 was after 2 units of blood transfusion.
Okay. So after that, what will you do?
So after this thing, sir, I would like to go for 2 things. One is hello.
Yeah, sorry, I missed that.
Yes, after this thing, the USG abdomen, sir, I would like to go for CCT abdomen, pelvis, and chest, and a colonoscopy and a biopsy.
Okay, so what are the reports of that? What does the colonoscopy show?
Colonoscopy shows there is a non-negotiable mass, ulceroproliferative, 50 centimeters from the anal verge.
Okay.
And the biopsy was cold differential adeno-CA, signaling cells.
Okay, and what did the CT abdomen and chest show?
CT shows there is a circumferential mass in the hepatic flexure, ascending colon, transverse colon, and sir, along with they have suspected lymphoma, sir. Along with this, there is a lymph node which is seen in the right hilar and subcarinal region, measuring 1.5 centimeter, and there are multiple enlarged peripancreatic upper retroperitoneal lymph nodes. They're measuring 2 centimeter, and a gallbladder calculi measuring 4 mm. These are the findings.
Okay. So, any other tests or anything else you are planning to do?
So serum CEA as a tumor marker.
Okay, serum tumor marker, CA and CA19-9. Both are important in CA colon. Of course, CA is much more important.
So CA19-9 was done in this case, but that time I couldn't understand the role of CA19-9 in CA colon, sir.
CA19-9 is also a tumor marker associated with colon, much less commonly.
Okay.
But it is usually done for, it can be, rarely it can be elevated in the absence of CE elevation. So you read, so there are some reports of this. Of course, there is not enough positive description because of, because there is no good correlation like there is with CE in terms of prognosis and, post-op follow-up and all those things are not very well described with CA19-9. But if you read many of the reports, they suggest CA19-9 also to be done because rarely CA is normal and CA19-9 only is elevated. So that can give you sometimes a clue as to what is to be done next. But otherwise, you're right. I mean, CA alone also, if you see in the exam, it's fine.
Okay, sir. So his CA was 142.
Okay.
CA19.
So supposing you've got a CA of 142, what is the significance of that in this patient?
So first thing, it supports the diagnosis of CA colon. Second
Yeah, but
thing
you've
is,
already got the biopsy proven.
yes, sir, we have got the biopsy proven. This is actually very high, and higher level may suggest a poorer prognosis and a metastatic disease to begin with.
Okay, good. So, what will you do then based on this report? So, you've got CT abdomen and CT chest also.
Yes, sir,
which is
chest also.
showing
Some hilar lymph nodes and subcanal lymph nodes 1.5 centimeter and retroperitoneal lymph node 2 centimeter. Peripancreatic.
Okay, so with this CA level, anything else you will do?
So we can go for PET-CT scan, sir, in this case.
No, we can go. Will you do it?
Yes, I will do it, sir.
So that is a little controversial. I agree with you. You should do it. So they are saying now that when you say about CA level, less than 5, 5 to 10, and 10 to 20 are the ones which are important for prognostication. But when you get such a high level of 140, it is suggestive of metastatic disease.
Okay.
Okay, so metastatic disease means, normally if you see NCCN guidelines, there is no role for PET-CT in normally diagnosed CA colon.
Yes, sir.
So they just do abdomen and chest CT. That is what is recommended. In all patients, PET-CT is not recommended for CA colon.
Okay, sir. So in this case, sir, I could find some reasons for doing it, sir. First thing is that the metabolic activity of the peripancreatic lymph nodes and the hilar lymph nodes can be found. Second thing is this peritoneal deposits, if they are present, they can be seen on PET-CT.
No, if they are not seen on abdominal CT, there is no higher incidence of seeing it on PET-CT at all. I don't think PET-CT will give you a higher yield of peritoneal disease at all. If you see a peritoneal lesions on abdominal CT, they may be able to characterize that. But otherwise, abdominal CT is actually quite accurate in determining peritoneal disease nowadays. You don't need a PET-CT for that. In fact, they say that if the PET-CT is done with inadequately thin CT cuts of the abdomen, you will miss peritoneal disease, which could be seen on a good quality abdominal CT scan.
Okay, sir. So for exam purpose, we shouldn't say this PET-CT in this case.
No. You have to say PET-CT. The reason is that I told you, if it is more than 20, it is suggestive of metastatic disease. See,
Yes,
the problem of CA, it is very strongly correlated with these values of 0 to 20. There's a lot of work done on that, in the sense that in terms of prognosis, etc.
Yes, sir.
So supposing it is more than 10 and it is node negative disease, then there is a role that you can even give chemotherapy in those patients, because the CA alone has got an relatively high prognostic value for those patients. So there is a lot of data on that, but if there is not a lot of data on that, if it is more than 100, what is the cutoff value where you will do further tests for that patient? So supposing you did not have any lymph nodes or anything seen in this, but your CA value was 140.
Yes, sir.
There is no guideline which tells you that you should do a PET-CT. I'm just discussing. I'm saying in the exam you can say, no, you will have to give some reason, why you're doing PET-CT. So here you can say that there is suspicious lymphadenopathy seen, which could be metastatic, especially in view of the high CA level. And the CA level being more than 100, there is a high chance that there is metastatic disease. It correlates with metastatic disease, and which is why I would like to do a PET-CT.
Yes, sir.
So supposing you do a PET-CT and you find that there is metastatic disease in the lymph nodes.
Yes, sir.
They will ask you, how will it change your management?
So this PET-CT in this case won't change the management.
Okay.
For two reasons, sir. First thing is the patient is melena. He's bleeding. He's already been transfused 2 units. And second thing is the colonoscopy shows that there's non-negotiable. He's passing flatus and motion, but it's non-negotiable. He might be in the impending obstruction. So a surgery has to be done for that.
No,
The
no, 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 no. Don't say that. Huh? That's totally wrong. Both the thing for so when you have bleeding and obstruction as an indication for surgery first, there's a lot of work done. That's unless the patient has got acute small bowel obstruction or has got ongoing lower GI bleed, it is not an indication for surgery because one shot of chemotherapy and his obstruction and melena will both stop.
Okay.
So that is not an indication to. In fact, many patients will present with bleed, and you don't use that as an indication for surgery in all patients. So in fact, bleeding stops in most patients. Immediately you give the start the chemotherapy. So no, it's an interesting case. I'll tell you why. Because most of the data now suggests that if you have metastatic disease at presentation, you have to give neoadjuvant chemotherapy first.
Okay.
But the disease has to be peritoneal, liver, or lung, not nodal disease. So if it is elevated due to the T stage of the disease or due to the lymphadenopathy, the CA level,
Yes, sir.
then it is not going to change your treatment management. So the PET CT is only to pick up distant metastasis if they are present. Now the value of distant metastasis in the absence of liver metastasis or peritoneal disease or ascites is low.
Yes, sir.
You understanding what I'm saying, no?
Yes, sir. Yes,
So
sir.
when you have so that's why I'm saying in this patient, so you have to be very clear when you say why you're going to do a PET CT, because if you say that it is due to the lymph node seen, then they will ask you, but how is your management going to change if PET CT says that these lymph nodes are confirmed to be metastatic? They are still part of your resection, no?
Okay. So,
It's not going to change your treatment.
I wanted to ask one thing, that these will be M1 lymph nodes.
So these are which are the lymph nodes which are positive?
So they've said that peripancreatic upper retroperitoneal lymph nodes measuring 2 centimeter in the lower peripancreatic region.
Okay, so there are M1 lymph nodes, but there's also you can treat after surgery, no?
Okay.
So see, I'll tell you there is a lot of controversy on this. So I don't know what you are going to say in the exam. So when you have a CA colon with any metastatic disease, okay. So if you have M1 disease, now this patient by definition has M1 disease. M1 disease can take many forms, no? It can be peritoneal disease, it could be liver metastasis, it could be lung metastasis, it could be a combination of these.
Yes, sir.
Or rarely it could be lymph node metastasis, what you're seeing in this patient.
Yes, sir.
Just 1 second. I have another call. I'll just call you back. So for this disease, what are you going to say? Now, for example, if you have a colon, suppose if you had a
Hello. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
So there are a lot of reports suggesting that if you have colon cancer primary with any metastatic disease, you have to treat it systemically first. And the only exception would be if the patient is having massive GI bleed or having acute obstruction.
Okay, sir.
So there are also enough reports to suggest that so supposing this patient had, say 6 liver metastases, will you still resect it first?
So 6 liver metastases, if they're diffuse, then I will not resect them first, sir.
No. Okay, supposing there are 3 liver metastases in the right lobe.
3 in the right lobe. No, sir. No upfront surgery, sir, in that case.
No, so question I'm trying to ask you is that in a metastatic colon cancer, will you give neoadjuvant treatment first or will you resect first? What is your literature, what does your reading tell you?
So
I will tell you that it is many people now suggest that you should take chemo first. So neoadjuvant, so your NCCN says both are allowed.
okay, sir.
So you can choose. What I would suggest is that if it is extensive disease, then depending on all those factors, age, fitness, how much weight patient has lost, where the disease is, whether it's peritoneal disease, liver metastasis, you put all those things together and then decide what is going to be the first treatment. Now, if there's only lymphadenopathy in this patient, I would do definitely surgery first in this patient. Plus, there is the other element of bleeding, anemia, and non-negotiability of the scope. Okay, so all those factors put together, I would in this patient offer surgery first.
Okay, sir.
Will you do a PET CT? So I would say in the exam, I would say yes, I will do a PET CT because there are lymph nodes present outside the area of resection and the CA level is very high.
Yes, sir.
Suggestive of metastatic disease. So just keep it simple. Now he may then ask you, how will the PET CT change your management? So then you can say that if there is extensive disease seen outside the abdomen or chest, then you may think of giving systemic treatment first.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so what I'm trying to tell you is that the indication, whether you will do or not, you say it clearly, and if they ask you the reason, you should be, ready with the reason. That's all. And keep it simple. Don't go round and round in the reasoning.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So somebody has said what did you say? Somebody is trying to say something. In the messages, कोई बोल रहा है कि कुछ non-avid nodes होगा तो.
If non-FDG nodes, then non-metastatic disease.
So you're trying to say that these nodes may not be positive, so you may land up with a better staging if you do a PET CT. So that could be a good reason. Hello?
Yes, sir.
You can say that also, that these nodes are not, you're not sure whether these nodes are metastatic or not, and PET CT may be a better guide for that. So you have two reasons now to see whether the M1 nodes are metastatic, and second is with a very high CA level, there is a high chance of metastatic disease at presentation.
Okay, sir.
So what is the other significance of this high CEA?
Sir, you're asking the pre-surgery, sir?
Yes, now you've got a pre-surgery CA level, no? So, see, what is most of the data, what does it suggest to you of pre-operative CEA?
So it tells about the prognosis, that the higher the CA, poorer is the prognosis, then metastatic disease, and
Correct. So basically, it is of only prognostic value, and as we were saying
Supports the
earlier,
diagnosis.
it supports the diagnosis. It's not of much diagnostic value.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so never rely on CA as a diagnostic value. Never say diagnostic value in the exam. Huh? It has got
Yes,
no
sir.
diagnostic value. It has got only prognostic value.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so apart from that, now whether it is so high or not is, there is not much work done on that, as I was saying earlier. So just ask you the exam, just say it is a prognostic value. It has, at presentation, if the CA is high, the chances of long-term disease recurrences are very high compared to if the CA is below 5.
Yes,
And in
sir.
fact, there are
Local. Yes,
cutoffs
sir.
also, 5 to 10, 0 to 5, 5 to 10, more than 10. Each one has its own prognostic values. As the value goes higher, the prognosis gets worse. So both the higher than normal value plus the amount by which it is higher, both are important.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what will you do next, and what? So you said you'll do a PET CT. PET CT, supposing it is showing you M1 disease and it is showing you no other metastasis in the rest of the body. What is going to be your next step?
So if the PET CT is showing same results as we see in the CT abdomen, then I'd like to go for a surgery, upfront surgery for him, sir.
Okay, so what surgery will you do?
So I'd like to go for right extended hemicolectomy.
Okay, so yeah, so that's what you will do in this patient, an extended right hemicolectomy. What are the vessels that you take in extended right hemicolectomy?
So, ileocolic, the right colic and the middle colic.
Okay, so your left colic will you take or no?
Left colics, no, sir. In the right extended, we don't take left colic.
Okay, and what is your understanding of D3 lymphadenectomy in right colon?
So there are this Japanese have divided into D1, D2, and D3. The pericolic, intermediate, and the central group of lymph nodes. So they have said in D3 you have to go for central vesicular ligation, the CVL, and ligate to have a better lymph node yield, D3 lymph node. So we should ligate the vessel at the origin of the SMA.
Correct. So that requires, I don't know whether you've done, I've done a few, it's quite a tricky thing to do because you have to dissect quite close to the root of the SMA down by the side of the uncinate process. So it requires a lot more dissection. If you see in the description also of the technique, it is there. The only thing is I'm not so sure what you will do now. See, the question I would also ask you is whether you're going to do a palliative resection or because you've got M1 disease, no? So are you going to do a palliative resection or are you going to do a potentially curative resection?
So I think potentially curative resection, I'll remove this if possible, these retroperitoneal lymph nodes also.
So retroperitoneal lymph nodes you will not do remove in upfront surgery. I don't think that is recommended at all.
So can we do the sampling of the lymph nodes at least, whether they are positive or not, to prove them pathological?
You can do a diagnostic sampling of the lymph node to prove that the PET CT is showing, because we have discussed that so many times. You can get TB in the lymph nodes also.
Yes, sir.
So definitely you should do a diagnostic sampling of the node to prove that there is M1 disease. But that is systemic. You'll control it systemically. But in colorectal cancer, you will still go in for potentially curative resection for the primary. So, for example, if you had 2 lung mets or 3 liver mets, you will still do a potentially curative resection for your colon tumor.
Yes, sir.
So that is why you will, if it's appropriate, you should do a D3 lymphadenectomy if that's something you believe in. There's quite a lot of data now on D3 lymphadenectomy. So you will be asked, what is the difference in D3 lymphadenectomy in terms of long-term survival and local recurrence. So you have any data from the Japanese data?
So I know of 3 trials which have compared this. One is COLD trial, which have
Yeah.
compared the D2 to D3. In that, the lymph node yield is some 20% more in case of D3, and the morbidity and the hospital stay was almost the same, but there was no difference in the overall survival in D2 D3 lymph node dissection as per the whole trial.
Correct. So there is no difference in overall survival. I think that's the important message. That is that there's a better yield, but no difference in long-term overall survival. I think in one paper there is a reduction in progression-free survival. There's a reduction in local recurrence and progression-free survival, but there is still no difference in overall survival.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, what about the? You said it's poorly differentiated, no? What are the other things that you will like to see on the histopathology once you resected the specimen?
So, poorly differentiated or model differentiated, the grade of the tumor, the depth in its mucosa, submucosa, subserosa, serosa, adjacent organs have involved, which are the margins are clear or not, R0 section, circumferential
Okay.
margin, proximal margins, the distal margin. So the lymph nodes, if perinodal extension is there in that or not.
Right. And other
So,
things like tumor budding and
Tumor budding and
lymphovascular invasion, and of
Reverse
course
pattern.
nowadays you will be asked for the MSI, the
Yes, sir.
biomarkers. So what are the biomarkers now that are done?
So for these patients, this MSI testing is done, and mutation analysis of the BRAF, EGFR, and KRAS. This is done, sir.
Yeah, so essentially the biomarkers which are routinely tested nowadays are the KRAS, BRAF, and MSI. Okay, so what does KRAS tell you? How do you test KRAS? What is the method of testing? Any idea?
So by the next generation sequencing, sir.
Correct. So the whole genome sequencing or next gen sequencing. And MSI, how do you calculate?
MSI is
Is by PCR. Okay. So basically, you first see on IHC.
Yes, sir. PCR.
Okay. So what you usually see is that usually first tested for loss of MMR protein. Okay, by IHC. So what is the MMR protein?
So this MR proteins, these are MLH1, MSH2, 6, and PMS2.
Correct. So basically, MMR protein is basically mismatch repair genes ka protein, and you want to see whether they are deficient or not. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Based on which you will diagnose MSI. So on simple IHC, you can first determine, because the number of patients who have got the MMR is, what is the number of people out of all colorectal cancers, how many will have MMR?
So approx 15%.
Correct. So about 15 to 20% will have. So you can see MMR easily on IHC. And if you see MMR, then you can do further study of the MSI on that is usually done by PCR. Okay.
Yes, sir.
And you will see, of course, BRAF by whether it's wild type or mutation is present. Usually that is also in 8 to 10% of people. And KRAS is more common. It is in about 40% of people. So both BRAF and KRAS are by genome sequencing, and whereas MSI is by PCR and immunohistochemistry. Immunohistochemistry, you will get an idea, and if you want to save some money, you can just do IHC first and see if there is MMR. If there is no, then you may not need to do further MSI to determine whether it is MSI stable or microsatellite instability is high. So it's classified into MSI, H, and MSS.
Yes, sir.
So which are the genes which are affected in Lynch syndrome?
Lynch, sir?
Yeah, Lynch, what will you get? So basically, this MMR is either sporadic or in this thing, no, germline mutation.
Yes, sir.
So germline defect is will be called as Lynch syndrome, no. So these are the what you just said earlier: MLH1, MSH2, MSH6, and PMS2 are the ones which are germline defect
Yes, sir.
mutations,
Yes, sir.
and the ones which are sporadic are usually due to silencing of MLH1 only.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
So it's important to know all this now because a lot of things are going to be based on that, no?
Yes, sir.
So, for example, if you have, what is the significance of MSIH? What value does it have? Is it have a prognostic value or predictive value? What does it have?
Predictive value, sir. If this is MSI high, then we can avoid chemotherapy in stage 2 CA colon.
Correct. So that is, it's got a predictive value, whereas BRAF has got a prognostic value. It's indicative of aggressive disease. And KRAS also has a predictive value. It predicts resistance to EGFR inhibitors.
EGFR, yes, sir.
Okay, so you have to know the importance of each. When you're doing KRAS, basically it has got a predictive value, predicts resistance to EGFR. BRAF has got a prognostic value, which is indicative of aggressive disease. And MSIH has also predictive value, which is a predictive response to immunotherapy. Or you can say it the other way, what you were saying, that in stage 2 disease, it may not be worth giving chemo because it will be more chemo resistant.
Yes, sir.
So that again you should learn in just simple these 2-3 things only you should know, and how the test should be done. So those 2 things as a surgeon they will ask you: how will you do this test? What is the clinical significance of this test?
Yes,
and you
sir.
should of course know in Lynch syndrome, so it could be germline as well as sporadic. So these 2-3 simple things you should know about the biomarkers.
Yes, sir.
Anything else anybody wants to add about biomarkers? The other thing which is, I don't know whether it is well proven, because people who have BRAF mutation and MSIH, both, they actually have a better overall prognosis. Those who have a BRAF mutation with microsatellite stable disease. So
Yes, sir.
that's another odd thing. But I think the numbers are very small, so I don't think it's very easy to put too much importance on that.
Fine, sir.
Okay, so you got it, no? So these 3 are the important markers that you will do: BRAF, KRAS, and
KRAS and MSI.
MMR, yeah.
Yes, sir.
So now, supposing you got post-op, this patient is recovering. Will you do this lap or will you do it open?
So this case,
So 1 minute, Pratik is saying, so also based on MSI. What are you trying to say, Pratik?
So immunotherapy can also be considered if MSI is positive.
Yes,
The other
so
role,
we said, no, so that's a predictive thing I said. So
Yes, sir.
when you say MSIH, it is actually predictive. That is actually the most important thing. If it is MSIH, it is predictive. So because Ronak said that you may not give chemotherapy in stage 2. So the actual predictive value is that there is a predictive response to immunotherapy which is higher with MSIH.
Fine, sir.
So that is the actual predictive value of MSIH.
Okay. Yes, sir. Just okay. Reiterating the same, sir.
Sorry?
Just reiterating the same fact. That's
Yeah.
immunotherapy. Okay.
Yeah, immunotherapy is correct. Point taken that if it is MSIH, then there is a predictive value of immunotherapy in the post-operative course. So, Ronak, what will you do? What surgery will you do? Lap or?
So in this case, with a huge mass, I expect that lap open will be better than lap. We can do both the things. There are trials showing that lap is equivalent to open, but in this case particularly, I would like to go for open surgery, sir.
I think that's right. If it's a T4 lesion or a large lesion, there should be, in the lab, there are certain contraindications or relative contraindications based on your experience and expertise. And you can say very nicely, that in my experience, which is this large mass, I would be worried about tumor spillage and, tumor rupture intraoperatively, which will worsen the prognosis, and which is why I would prefer to do an open surgery for this patient. So if it was not so large, what would you would do a lap. So you would do a lap extended right hemicolectomy. Is your anastomosis going to be intracorporeal or extracorporeal? So there are randomized trials now, lap intracorporeal versus extracorporeal. So people now don't do a hybrid anastomosis. So there is evidence to suggest that a lap complete intracorporeal anastomosis is better than a exteriorized. So many people do a right hemicolectomy and they do an external anastomosis because you have to make a small incision to remove the specimen.
Yes, sir.
So there is a trial, randomized trial. I'll email it to you.
Yes, sir.
It's published recently, the last couple of years in Annals. Randomized trial comparing intracorporeal versus extracorporeal anastomosis, which says clearly that the intracorporeal anastomosis has a better short-term result. Lower hospital stay, earlier return to work, earlier return to normal activities, etc. So if you have a lesion where you're doing a lap surgery, then you should try to do intracorporeal anastomosis.
Yes, sir. Okay. Okay, sir.
What else? Any other technical points or things that you want to cover in?
So this approach, if you can just throw some light on medial to lateral, lateral to medial.
Correct. So laparoscopic now, most people will do it medial to lateral only. So when you are doing an open approach, hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, we are listening,
So
sir.
most of the people now say that you should do the ligation first, and
Yes,
in
sir.
a laparoscopic surgery, of course, it is now both for LAR as well as for right colon. You would be encouraged to do a medial to lateral approach. You would have to take the vessels first and then mobilize the rest of the specimen.
Yes, sir.
So more and more people are doing that at open also, because you have vascular control first, and before you start mobilizing the colon and the tumor, you will have vascular control first, so that the chances of intraoperative tumor dissemination is reduced.
Yes, sir.
So more and more people are now even at open switching over to doing that if they're doing open. But lap, of course, everybody is doing now, whether you do LAR or you do this. The biggest advantage in lap is that you don't have the specimen dangling in front of you and getting in the way. So you don't want to do that, and you want to do a medial to lateral approach so that it is actually technically easier to do.
Yes, sir. Okay.
And it has an oncological principle also, that you will ligate the vessels before you do anything else. But having said that, it's not easy. It's tricky. You need the learning curve for that is quite steep, because it's easy to identify the vessels when you're biomanually palpating it at open, when you have the entire specimen in your hand.
Yes, sir.
And you can get lost in the mesentery,
Laparoscope.
especially if it's an obese person laparoscopically. You
Yes,
can
sir.
get lost in the mesentery. So in the last 2 years, twice I've had to once go because there was massive bleeding from the SMV. And in one patient, when they were doing the colectomy, there was the pancreas had been divided half, and the lower bile duct had been excised at the time of doing this right colon. So it's not easy.
Okay.
So Saurabh has asked if there is limited peritoneal disease, should you do what? NACT or surgery first?
Limited peritoneal deposit with ascending colon.
Yeah, so I think you want to answer that, Ronak?
Yes, sir. So if there's a limited peritoneal deposits which is continuous with ascending colon, then surgery first, sir.
Yes, I agree. Surgery first is, there's quite a lot of evidence now for limited peritoneal disease. Surgery first, followed by adjuvant chemotherapy. And in fact, there is data on in such a situation of HIPEC also for
IPAC.
colorectal cancer. But I think that is more in the recurrent setting, not in the primary setting.
Yes, sir.
With limited peritoneal disease with a low PCI index, you can do a HIPEC in colorectal cancer also. But that is usually with recurrent disease. Upfront HIPEC, I don't think is recommended for CA colon with limited local peritoneal disease at the moment. Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, what was I going to? Any other questions are there? Any other things that we need to?
So, regarding this case, sir, so in this exam, sir, we will, so like if supposingly they ask about the hemicolectomy steps. So in books it is written that we dissect the white line of told, like midline laparotomy, see for the disseminated disease. If not, then proceed. We start with the white line of told. So sir, now we should not say that. We should say that we should first ligate the vessels and then we will do the other things later on.
Yeah, so I don't know how many examiners are doing that. I would still say that most people are exploring and doing the lateral to medial dissection, So I don't know what most of the examiners, even in Tata, I don't think they do it open. I don't think they are doing medial to lateral.
Okay.
So I don't know what you should say in the exam.
Yes, sir.
Why don't you ask anybody else knows? I mean, you can ask the people who have given the exam what they have found out, or whether they've gone for classes in which the examiners are present.
Yes,
what
sir.
the examiners would advise them to say.
We'll
I
ask them.
personally would advise you in the exam you'll have to say. I think most surgeons are still doing lateral to medial. So you should stick to those steps. At least at open surgery. Laparoscopically, definitely you have to say that nobody does lateral to medial. You have to say medial to lateral.
Okay, sir. Okay. And so, in this case, sir, if the patient is obstructed, like CECT, when we say, they ask that oral contrast will we give or not. So, if supposedly the patient is an obstruction, so we will not give oral contrast in this.
No, you can give oral contrast. You can give water-soluble contrast. Oral contrast for bowel obstruction is routinely given, so that's not an issue at all. You can give many different types of contrast. You can give gastrografin, you can give, the hyper-soluble contrast, the small volume hyper-soluble, because supposing patient is vomiting a lot, you can give through the Rein's tube, 60 ml of contrast, which is, usually with mannitol. Negative contrast. So you can give that. That is what is usually given in acute obstruction, where amount is very limited, that you can give orally.
Yes, sir. Okay.
No, contrast is always given. You have to give. That is in acute obstruction. That in this impending obstruction, it doesn't matter. You can give anything. It usually doesn't precipitate obstruction, so I won't worry about it.
Okay.
So why is the blood transfusion? Now that's a very big step, no? You didn't mention anything about why the patient was transfused blood. What is the treatment of patients who with right-sided colon tumors who come with anemia? Are you supposed to give blood to these patients?
I don't know exactly.
What is there's a huge negative prognostic impact, no, of the blood transfusion in colon cancer. So there are 2-3 papers published in BMJ, BJS about giving IV iron for these patients.
Okay. So
see, you cannot give normovolumic hemodilution. You cannot do in these patients. Because the hemoglobin is already low. If the hemoglobin is below 10, you cannot do normovolumic hemodilution.
Yes, sir.
So you cannot take blood out and give it after the resection on table. That is also not a good idea because hemoglobin is low. So how do you plan it? Now there are many papers which suggest that you can give, there's a new IV iron which is available,
Iron.
very safe. You can give that, and the hemoglobin will come up. So it is a good method to avoid blood transfusion.
Okay, sir.
Now, obviously, you can't do that if the patient is completely obstructed and you have to operate as an emergency is different. But remember one thing, that just non-negotiability of the scope, if the patient is having no clinical signs and symptoms of obstruction, it doesn't matter if you operate even 1 week or 10 days later. Means in most Scandinavian countries and in countries where colorectal cancer rates are high, this patient will not be transfused any blood.
Okay. So we'll
And
give them
there's a
iron
question,
supplement.
transfusion at the time of surgery. So, but that is also having a bad prognosis. No? So why would you transfuse at the time of surgery?
So sir, we have to give this iron supplements. That's the best answer. Like,
Yes, there is data on it. There is prospective, good quality data on it.
okay, sir.
Please read it because it's very important. You cannot be giving blood transfusion to patients of colon cancer. हम लोग कुछ भी देते हैं, लेकिन it is not. Let me see if I can find any reference. I've read something recently only on. Anyway, I can't find it offhand. Just try and see if you can find IV iron in patients with colon cancer.
Fine, sir.
What is the other significance of a right-sided disease?
So right-sided disease.
And Niket Shah has put up some reference. So Niket, what is the reference telling us?
Hello, Niket.
Hello.
You put up some reference on.
Yes, sir. So this article shows that blood transfusion is is a negative prognostic indicator during colorectal surgeries. If it is given prior to performing the surgery, it indicates.
Yeah, see there is Saurabh has put up. I told you ना BMJ में पढ़ा था. BMJ में आया है report. Anyway, so
yeah.
There is another one in called the Prefico trial also. Which is published, that is also from Scandinavia. So, Nikhil, sorry to interrupt you. So, what does your trial tell us? Dr. Niket.
Yes, sir. So it has a negative impact on the prognosis in the patients with colorectal cancer, sir. That is what it has to do.
No. So, what is the solution?
So, sir, normally, like you said, it should be intravenous iron prior to surgery or giving some iron supplements in the pre-operative period.
I know, but iron supplements will take a long time, no? IV iron takes a short time. So in this patient, you cannot wait for 6 weeks. Yeah, it will take a long time for the oral iron to bring up the hemoglobin.
So normally, sir, at our institute, we usually preserve PCB for the patient during the surgery, and if we are anticipating good amount of blood loss, we usually give blood transfusion. That is what is followed at our center, but this is just one of the articles that I had gone through recently. So
I know what I'm trying to tell you is that we take it very lightly and we go on transfusing blood for colorectal cancer patients in India. According to me, it is a wrong practice, and you should try to do other methods to reduce it. See, colorectal cancer is not as common here as it is in the West. So in the West, they have because they have discovered the negative impact, and there is a lot of data on that, on blood transfusion in colorectal cancer. They try very hard to avoid giving blood transfusions in these patients. And there are many good ways to avoid it. It's a not very difficult way to do it. The problem here is that all patients who come here within the next few days, you are going to operate on them. That is the issue. But if you don't have to operate on all of them. In most Scandinavian countries, US, England, they are given a date for surgery 3-4 weeks down the line. So you can give IV iron to those patients and build up the hemoglobin.
Yes, sir. Right, sir.
So what is the other right-sided colon cancer? What is the other significance of that?
So the prognosis of right-sided colon cancer is poorer as compared to the left side. You're asking in reference to left side or left?
No. So the cancer, when it occurs more on the right side, what is the other significance? One is you're right, is the prognosis is worse. And more hereditary cancers are in the right side, no?
Right side, yes, sir.
So that you should be careful, especially if you get
Younger age.
Either a mucin secreting or younger age. You should take a very careful family history.
Yes, sir.
Because it may be a sporadic, no? It may be, so then you can take that as an index case and you may have to follow up the siblings for that. Anyway, you will get to know that from the, when you do your MSI on that patient.
So I wanted to add one thing on this point written, sir, on this transfusions were associated with poor prognosis. So once there was discussion on this article, so they said that the transfusions was actually not associated with poor prognosis. It was the disease. Percentage transfusion if given in T3, T4 disease. So those T3, T4 already required more transfusion.
No. Arey Baba, you read it carefully. There are at least 20, 30 articles on that, and they will factor in for the stage for the disease. We're talking stage for stage.
Yes, sir.
Same stage we are talking about. So, in stage for stage also, prognosis is worse if you transfuse the patient.
Okay. I'll read it once again.
Yeah. Please go through it. There's a lot of data on it. And meaning it used to move from one to the other. From this data has been coming from the 70s, 80s. Then as you said, they said, no, it is because of more advanced disease that you give transfusion, and in those patients, obviously, prognosis is going to be worse. But that's not the case. Even stage for stage, it is worse. So just check it out properly.
Fine, sir. Yes, sir.
And what else? One more point was to be covered. What about bowel prep? Will you give bowel prep to all patients?
So usually the articles say that in right side colon cancer nowadays we're not giving bowel preparation.
Correct. So nowadays you don't give. There's no advantage. What about left side?
So left side is controversial, sir. Both things are there. Like they're giving and.
Yeah, but today most patients are giving. Most surgeons are giving. Okay. So there's this huge debate about right side, left side. Right side, I mean, nobody will give. And left side, there was a lot of debate about whether to give or not. Now, in the last 8 to 10 years, there is again mounting evidence that you should give bowel preparation. Not only that, they are saying that you should give oral bowel preparation also. Okay. So he's written here, distal rectal washouts reduces recurrence. That's a separate issue. We're not talking about recurrence. We're talking about more in terms of reducing anastomotic leak or reducing the morbidity of anastomotic leaks. So there was a lot of controversy. So the colon and rectum are two different things. Okay. So previously there was a lot of data suggesting that right colon, transverse colon, and left colon, there is no advantage of giving bowel prep. Okay. So that seems to have changed now to no need for right side or transverse colon, but left side colon you should give bowel prep. Okay, not only bowel prep, but you have to give oral bowel prep also in terms of oral antibiotic prophylaxis with neomycin. In the last 5 years, there are a lot of studies which have come saying that there is an advantage in left colon. Rectum, again, rectum followed colon. So there was not enough evidence first in rectum. So people were not giving for colon, but giving for low rectum. And doing a plus minus stoma in that situation where they gave, and anyway, doing a stoma is no point unless you've given bowel prep, okay? Because your
Yes,
left
sir.
colon is going to be full of feces. So if you're going to do a low rectum, then you need to do bowel prep, okay? So again, there was some data which suggested that for rectum also you don't need to do bowel prep, okay? Now that is more or less given up, and most people for rectum will do bowel preparation. In addition to bowel preparation, they will also give neomycin. So please read that
Yes, sir.
data. There is, if I can find that, I'll send it to you on email. But
Yes, sir.
I would say that in the exam, if you're asked, right colon no bowel preparation, left colon and rectum bowel preparation is required, and you may use neomycin orally also. Unfortunately, neomycin is not available easily in India. Oral neomycin is not available anymore.
Yes, sir. Okay. Okay, sir.
Okay. So, what I will, if there's anything else, any other questions or any other doubts to be,
So one thing they ask in exam that what is the ideal time of giving the peg leg? Suppose so, sir. If we say that we give in the night, so they ask that you want the patient to be going to the washroom whole night. So some says that give at 4 p.m. So
yeah, so usually, I mean, some people say 48 hours, but I would say that you give it at 4 p.m. Usually 4 to 6 p.m. if you finish the bowel prep by 10:30, they would have finished their, the clearance. Because if you give full peg leg, it takes about 2.5 to 3 hours to clear it after you finish taking it. 2 hours you'll take it, and about 2.5 to 3 hours you should clear it.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Some people suggest you give it 48 hours before and then put patient only on liquid diet. See, the reason to do that, no, that is not a bad idea actually, because many times in the morning, if patient has passed on stool and he is not fully prepared, what do? You cancel the surgery.
Yes, sir.
So, some people give it for 48 hours prior to that because of that. So, in case it is not fully done, then you can, give only liquids or give some, 50% more prep again.
Okay.
And remember one thing, that many patients so edema of the bowel will be less when given 48 hours plus. I don't think there is any evidence for that. I'm not sure about that question, but I don't think that is the reason why you give it 48 hours before. Many of my colleagues in UK are giving it because they are not sure whether there is, in some patients, 20-30% of patients, bowel doesn't get adequately prepared.
Yes, sir.
And that you will come to know if you're doing it in the night, only in the morning before the surgery.
Okay. Okay, sir.
Anything else?
And sir, your this on-table lavage, sir, if we are asked about this,
No, it's given up. On-table lavage is given up.
we can give. Okay.
Yes. No, it's given up. I don't think anybody does
Given up,
on-table
okay.
lavage now.
Okay, sir.
So if you are doing, on-table lavage applies only to acutely obstructed left-sided colons.
Yes, sir.
It doesn't apply to anything else. And now there is a lot of data in so what will you do in acute left-sided obstruction now?
So at our institute, sir, we first do the colostomy, and then we wait for 7 days, and then we in meanwhile we investigate the patient, and then we operate, and we usually close the colostomy, and if not, then after this
So you do a 3-stage dissection.
3 stage. Yes, sir.
Right. Yeah, so most people would say they moved on from 3-stage to 2-stage dissection. So that's the question, whether 2-stage dissection, the preferred method used to be that you do a resection with on-table lavage and plus minus ileostomy, or you do a resection and ileostomy, or you do Hartmann's. So these are your 3 options, okay? So option 1 is now more or less given up, where you don't do an on-table lavage. It's very fiddly, there's a lot of sepsis issues. So it's not easy to do. So most people, in the recent literature, there is no comparison even with on-table lavage. So I don't think you should do on-table lavage. You should not mention in the exam right now. The studies are trying to show either stenting versus primary resection versus Hartmann. So I think majority of the people would do a formal resection and do a Hartmann procedure, because that is the safest in terms of, because your bowel is not prepared, no? And
Yes, sir.
to do a stoma, it doesn't make sense because your whole left colon is still full of stool.
Yes, sir.
So the chances of your mobility will be quite high if you do a primary resection and anastomosis with a defunctioning ileostomy. So I would say that probably the safest thing to do is to do a formal resection of the primary tumor with a Hartmann and then reverse it later.
Okay. Yes, sir.
So that would
Answer?
be the procedure for left-sided colon. So there's a lot of data. You should be aware of that data for stenting. There are at least 5 papers in the last 5 years, 2 or 3 are randomized trials on stenting versus this. So acute left-sided obstruction, you can stent and then operate electively.
Yes,
The
sir.
biggest problem is there is a 15 to 18% incidence of stent causing perforation. So
Yes,
that converts it's a disaster situation. So only in very experienced centers where stenting is done regularly and routinely, you should follow this procedure. Otherwise, it's not a good idea.
Okay. So one thing more I wanted to ask is transverse colostomy. So is there any controversy between the left and right-sided transverse colostomy?
No, not that I'm aware, but most of the people who do on the right side, because if you have a left-sided growth, it may interfere with your mobilization of the transverse colon. No?
Okay. Okay.
So you should
So
always
right
do a right
is
transverse colostomy if you're doing a 3-stage procedure. But in the
Okay.
exam, I don't think you should mention 3-stage procedure. It is not done anymore.
So in exam, sir, we should mention about the stenting, sir. Like,
I think you should not mention it unless they ask you,
okay.
because I don't think many centers in India are doing it. You should just be aware of the literature. I don't think many centers in India are doing it.
Okay. Okay, sir.
Okay. So one suggestion I had is that there is my student who did DNB GI surgery in Jaslok was in UK for 4-5 years, and he's got a huge experience in HIPEC. So if you have a case which is suitable for that, he's done his like colorectal exam and all over there in UK. He's worked in the very high volume center. So you can do a case presentation with him. Dr. Chintamani Godbole, his name is. So if you have such a case, he'll be the right person to present to. He has a lot of free time just now. He'll just come back.
Okay.
So he'll be able to take it properly. All the detailed, technical aspects, the academic aspects, all that he'll be able to help you with. The CT aspects, how to calculate peritoneal carcinomatosis index, all those things.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Because you better prepare well for that. A lot of data in the Annals of Surgical Oncology, if you see in the last 5 years, almost 15 to 20% of papers are on HIPEC.
Yes, sir.
So if you want this thing, then you can present to Dr. Chintamani. I will share his number with you, Ronak.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay, anything else that we have left out or... So this, I'll send you, you can share it with everybody, this biomarkers in colorectal cancer. So I usually refer to this 1 or 2 papers which have been published in GI Oncology, which gives it in a very nice way. Gives it in a very detailed way also of what the biomarkers are, and gives the clinical relevance of each, for surgeons. It's published in Journal of Surgery, I think Gastrointestinal Oncology. So I'll send it to you, Ronak, on your email, that paper.
Yes, sir.
It gives a very nice short, for surgeon level ka.
Yes, sir. Needed, whatever is needed.
What is needed, and importance of each,
Yes, sir.
and how it changes the different treatment protocols for immunotherapy or chemotherapy.
Okay, sir. So, okay.
Anything else is there
So,
we
so,
have left
so
out?
before ending, sir, I would like to ask two questions, sir. Just two more. So, if this is not related to this thing, sir, but if you're doing anterior resection, sir, there's one more question asked: ileostomy versus transverse colostomy. So what is your take on this, sir?
Um, I would usually do a ileostomy, but colostomy is also fine. I mean, there are very little prospective data comparing the two. Whatever data there is favors ileostomy over colostomy.
So,
So
what are the advantages we can say in exams? So, like easy closure and
yeah, easy
not adhesions
closure.
to the stomach.
Yeah, so it's basically easy to bring out, easy closure. There's very less mobilization required, and the closure is easy. I think those are the two main advantages.
Okay, sir.
And if you do a proper Brook ileostomy, I think the defunctioning is also better. When you do a colostomy, you have to be very careful to make it properly defunction. Since you're doing it flush with the skin, you
Yes, sir.
have to put a Foley's catheter or a red rubber catheter to ensure that it doesn't go into the distal loop, you know. Whereas ileostomy, because you bring it out as a pouting, it is always it gives better defunctioning to the anastomosis.
Okay, sir.
So the few relevant papers which are there comparing the two, they're small studies. They're not very this thing. I think most people do it on their own, whatever their personal experience is. But majority of the people would nowadays do a defunctioning ileostomy and not a colostomy.
Okay, sir. And so the last thing, sir, in this in the colonoscopy, sir, it is written that this tolerance is GCS1. Sir, you have any idea what is this tolerance?
Sorry, what is it?
So in the
Tolerance?
colonoscopy, it is written
Hmm.
tolerance.
Tolerance?
Yes, a tolerance GCS1.
Acha.
I am able to find out all the other things written, but not this tolerance
GCS,
GCS.
the only thing I know is Glasgow Coma Scale.
Yes, sir, that's
So
what we know.
I don't know what GCS means.
Okay, sir. Okay, we'll
Maybe
find
you
out,
can
sir.
ask some of the DM or BNB gastro residents.
Fine, fine, sir. We'll ask.
Yeah, sorry, I don't really tell. When you find out, you tell me also
Yes, sir.
what
Yes,
it
sir.
means.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay, good. Everybody else is all okay. Any other questions from anybody else? Good. I think most people have left.
Uh,
Okay, so who all are there? This time, quite a few. Dipti, Niket, Ronak, Gaurav. So all of you are exam going. Lalita, Pradeep, Shilpa. All of you are exam going.
yes, sir.
Good, good. So all the best to all of you. And whenever you have any other case, let me know. We can do it regularly. If anybody else wants to present, also please let me know. I'll be happy to help you out.
Yes, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for your
Okay.
time, sir.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Good night, sir. Thank you.
Bye.